Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan. My name is Khaldun Atsari. I'm Vice President and will be moderating today's event. And thank you also for coming, even though we have a typhoon. But the economic typhoon might be also around the corner in Japan because the situation seems like, according to many numbers, not very clear. And we know now that after the elections of the House of Councillors, the government and the ruling parties have no challenges anymore. And also the opposition parties pose no threat to the government. So I think, according to many reports, Mr. Abe's main challenge is the economy now. And whether or not this will be a successful phase out of the economy is the issue we will discuss today at this very timely event. Let me introduce our speakers first. At my very right, Ms. Sayuri Shirai. She is a guest professor at Keio University and a visiting scholar at the Asian Development Bank Institute. She was a member of the policy board of the Bank of Japan from April 2011 until March 2016. Recently. And at the bank's January meeting, she was one of the 4 board members who opposed the governor proposal to adopt negative interest rate policy. Before joining the bank, Ms. Shirai was a professor at Keio University and previously was an economist at the International Monetary Fund. And she also graduated from Keio and holds a PhD in economics from Columbia University. And to her very right, Mr. Hiromichi Shirakawa is a chief economist for Japan at Credit Suisse. Prior to joining Credit Suisse in 2006, he was chief economist for Japan at UBS Securities. And for 16 years, he worked at the Bank of Japan as an economist and a senior administrator. He was also a special assistant to the governor during the domestic financial crisis of 1997-1998. And Mr. Shirakawa holds BA in economics from Keio University and PhD in policy studies from Kato School at the Chiba University of Commerce. And to his right, Mr. Kosuke Motani, he is a chief senior economist at the Japan Research Institute and also an expert in demography and regional economic promotion. He creates and presents strategies for national and local governments, private enterprise, and non-profit organizations. He joined the Development Bank of Japan in 1988, rising to become senior vice president at the Department of Regional Development. So during my chat with them, I heard they will be speaking frankly about the economic situation. You can ask as strong question as you wish. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our guest. Thank you. We will start from the same order I gave today, please. I think every speaker will talk about 15 minutes and then followed by questions and answers.
Okay. First of all, thank you very much for giving me this great opportunity to express my view about new economic stimulus package. It's always very nice for me to come back here. Last time I made a presentation was June 1st. Before I start my presentation, let me highlight the government new economic stimulus package. In the report clearly said the main purpose of this new economic stimulus package is overcoming deflation and achieving 3% nominal and 2% real GDP growth over medium term. And the report admitted that income and employment conditions have improved, but not enough to raise aggregate demand and prices. Therefore, it concluded that additional budgetary spending is necessary. Also, some spending may help raise potential growth with structural reform. While there are many measures, I think the main measures comprise of the following two issues. The first one is increasing public investment, tourism, Olympics, railways, and agriculture. And the second point is mitigating labor shortage and also improving the quality of human capital. My tentative assessment is that the direction of this new economic stimulus package is right, and the government understands what they have to do. But I'm not really sure to what extent these measures can contribute to the raising the potential economic growth of Japan, and also enabling the 2% target together with BOJ's monetary easing. Let me begin my presentation and as a former policymaker at Bank of Japan, and since monetary policy is a part of Abenomics, I like to focus my presentation on new economic stimulus package, particularly with regards to the deflation structure and also some implication on the monetary policy. So in part one, I start my presentation by posing the following question. So what is the true state of deflation in Japan? So let's go over the basic fact. Between 2000 and 2012, the average CPI inflation was negative 0.3%. Since the April 2013, when the Kuroda came and the QQE started, until now, the average inflation is 0.6%. However, these past 4 months, up to June 2016, again, it's a mild deflation, minus 0.4%. Now, despite the fact that the Japan, again, facing the deflation, but the household price perception and expectation are not deflationary. Actually, the point is that the household, their price perception expectation are indeed inflationary. For example, the household perceived inflation. We will see the chart in a minute, okay? So for example, household perceived inflation, defined as current perceived prices relative to the previous year, is always higher than actual CPI inflation statistics. Another example is household long-term inflation expectations, such as 5 years ahead, is always higher than actual CPI inflation statistics. Therefore, the household do not have deflationary mindset. This is why household do not delay consumption. If household really believe in deflation, they will postpone consumption now, right? And they wait until price will go down and to spend. But that's not happening. So when the government talk about deflation, I think we really have to understand the true the structure of deflation, issues. So now let's look at some data. This is shows a relationship between perceived inflation rate, which is a red line, and the blue dotted line is actual CPI inflation. And you can see there's a clear gap between perceived inflation and actual CPI inflation. So this shows an upward bias. And on average, the upward bias is about 2%. Okay? And another example I want to show you is a relationship between actual CPI inflation data and inflation expectation. And most important things as a monetary policy maker is a long-term inflation expectation. This is 5 year ahead household inflation expectation, always much higher than actual CPI inflations. Now, this upward bias you can also see in the United States, but in the United States, upward bias is just about 1%. So in Japan, for some reason, households always feel the inflation now, and also inflation is coming rather than deflations. Okay? So the question is, what explains household upward bias? At least two factors contributing to this upward bias. The first one is the long-standing stagnant income growth and expected household tighter budget. And another factor is the rapidly rising prices of non-durable goods, such as food and everyday goods. It started from early 2000 up to early 2014, and still those prices remain at high level. And as a result, more than 80% of Japanese households do not accept the price rise. They said the price rise is unfavorable. And because of this, the upward bias and resistance to price rise, corporate sector find it very difficult to raise sales prices. Therefore, the deflation-oriented mindset, when government often say, actually means those are applied to the state of corporate sector, not to the household sector. Okay, so let's look at the data. First, pay attention to the blue dotted line. This is the income outlook DI, which means the percentage of respondents who say income are expected to go up minus the income expected to go down. So if it's negative, it means the majority of people think income from 1 year, income 1 year ahead will go down. Always. And look at the next one. Please pay attention to the red line. This is the price outlook. Most of the people say that in 1 year from now, price will go up rather than going down. So together with the expected decline in income outlook, but the expected increase in prices, what it means is the household expect the real income to go down. And so as a result, please pay attention to the spending outlook DI. This shows the difference between spending going up and spending going down. So as a result, household always expects to spend less. This is a reality. And probably somewhat different from what government say, because government say there's a deflationary concerns, deflationary mindset, and then partly because of lack of demand. But I think issues are somewhat more complicated than that. Okay, so this is the actual data. This is the hourly wages, and in nominal and real, both steadily dropping since 2000. Now, between 2012 and 2015, the nominal wages stopped declining, so it became a constant. But the real wages, as you know, as a result of consumption tax hike and as a result of yen's depreciation, monetary easing, prices went up too rapidly compared to nominal wages. So this is a reality. This explains why households always feel their budget are getting tighter. Now, this is a quite famous data, especially blue dotted line. This is coming from the famous BOJ's Tankan survey. They started to question about the inflation expectation. This is a 1 year ahead inflation expectation average. The blue dotted line shows average inflation expectation of the corporate sector. So usually media report this number. But my point here is we got to be very careful about interpretation of this data. When you look at blue dotted line, initially when they started this questionnaire from April 2014, it was around 1.1. It looks higher, right? It looks quite high. But in reality, pay attention to the red line, which shows that about 60% of respondents say they just have to keep their sales prices constant. They cannot raise. So even when average inflation was 1.1, the truth is 60% of people said they are not expecting higher prices. Okay, so you cannot see this reality just by looking at average numbers. Okay, so another example I want to show. This is the corporate sector's 5 year ahead inflation expectation. So again, please pay attention to this blue dotted line, which often reported by BOJ and the media. Initially, it was around 2.1, 2.3. It looks very high. It's almost reaching 2% target, but it's not, because in the reality, pay attention to orange one. More than 30% of corporate sectors say they are not sure about their sales outlook in the 5 year ahead. And about 25% of people say they expect their prices to remain constant. So this is a reality. So the reality is that this is the implication from part 1. So I have 3 points. Since the adoption of QQE, some firms have begun to raise the sales prices by providing innovative goods and services. However, the household upward bias continues to prevail, and the negative interest rate policy has not helped much in reducing the bias. And the BOJ's task is very challenging because it must reduce household upward bias so that the household tolerance to price rise will improve. What they have to do, they need to have a sustainable increase in nominal and real wages. And as you saw, it takes many years for Japan to achieve that situation. And second, the BOJ really have to improve the public understanding of 2% plus stability target. Without the household understanding of 2% target, it's almost impossible for BOJ to achieve 2% target. And at this moment, many people do not understand what the point of 2%, why we need 2%. My suggestion at this moment is because it takes many years for BOJ to achieve 2%, I suggest two-step approach, which is while maintaining 1%, while maintaining 2% target, we should not drop 2% target. We should keep it as a longer run goal, but for a time being, the BOJ should try to achieve 1% target in a stable manner. So since the time is limited, let me quickly go to the next section, assessment of the new economic stimulus package. Now, you know that the government said they want to overcome the deflation and they want to achieve 3% nominal GDP growth and 2% real GDP growth. In order to do that, I really think we have to pay attention to the consumption because consumption accounts for 60% of GDP. So let's look at this chart. First, please look at green dotted line. This is the consumption prices. And the blue line shows real consumption. And up to the 2014 first quarter, it seems to me there is an inverse relationship between prices and real consumption. So over these years, many years, the prices were going down steadily. And then the real consumption is going up. Okay, so in the reality, when you look at the nominal consumption, red line, it was just remained very sluggish and almost constant. But since the 2014 second quarter, the price stopped dropping. And so price became very stable, and then real consumption became stable. So you see, this is the problem that Japan is facing. How can Japan achieve both price increase and real consumption increase? This is very difficult. So far, the government and BOJ hasn't achieved this situation. Okay? So the key is services sector. Why? Because service sector account for 60% of total consumption. And the services sector is the only item whose real consumption is continuing to increase. Okay, so the services sector is key for BOJ to achieve 2%, also for the government to achieve nominal 3% growth and 2% real GDP growth. Okay, so let's look at the fact. Now, let's look at prices, the deflators. It was dropping until 2013, and after that, it became stagnant and constant. In the meanwhile, the real consumption is still steadily growing. So the government really have to achieve both increase in prices and real consumption. So what the government needs to do, the final presentation, is, of course, we really have to pay attention to the services. The needs to achieve a sustainable wage increase in the services sector. How can they do it? I think we all know the productivity growth must improve, especially in professional services, financial, insurance services, ITC, robotics, health, pharmaceutical. We really need to improve productivity. Also, we have to improve the quality of people. I guess we have to have more internationally oriented person, and the people have to engage in foreign transactions in services. Also, sustainability of social security system is a must because people worry about the sustainability of social security system. Without that, we cannot increase the consumption steadily. And so government really have to cut the cost of social expenditure probably have to postpone the retirement age. And also we have to think about how to raise post-retirement income because pensioners are so sensitive to prices. They are against price increase. So without increasing their income, it's very difficult for BOJ to achieve price increase in services and 2% target. Of course, we have to internationalize SME, expand their size, intensify IT use. And then final point is that we really have to change working environment and corporate culture. We have to utilize young people and female more efficiently. And then so far, government direction is correct, but I think they really have to accelerate the pace of reforms. Okay, I stop my presentation here.
Okay, I'm always bit unprepared. I haven't given you any presentation slides and sort of things. So I just want to talk about without presentation slides. First of all, I would like to talk about the stimulus package. A very interesting point is that this is not demand stimulus. This is very interestingly, government focuses on, improving potential GDP. I think it was the biggest disappointment to the overseas investors because I think the many investors actually expected that Japan to spend money to stimulating consumption. And even the very prominent economists such as Bernanke, talked about the helicopter money kind of things. So Japan has to spend, or even through tax cuts, BOJ underlined bonds, and stimulate consumption because consumption has been sluggish. But interesting thing was that government did not respond much to that argument. Interestingly, this package is a very multi-year investment project mainly, and very limited tax cuts or cash handouts. And we do not think this is really stimulating consumption. So this is probably to improve potential GDP growth rate into the future by improving productivity of public capital stock, airports, seaports, highways. In our view, Japan's public capital, such as I think the airports, seaports, have become already quite aged. So productivity has come down. So it is probably improving potential GDP over the longer run, but in the short run, stimulus will be quite limited. In our assessment, maximum impact on GDP for the coming 2 years is in total for coming 2 years, only 0.5 percentage point. The good thing is, we actually expected the GDP to go into negative territory next year. We have been saying for a long time that Japan will suffer cyclical recession in 2017, mainly because of the 8-year business cycle. But postponement of the VAT hike plus the stimulus package, Japan can manage in avoiding recession next year. But still, we expect maybe only 0.5% kind of number. We do not expect the GDP growth touching 1% next year, even with this package. Second point I'd like to make is that consumption sluggishness seems to come from, I tend to agree with the Shirai-san's view about the expected inflation, real wages have come down. We continue to think that Japanese households are quite sensitive to food inflation. I think if you take a look at the Japanese CPI, headlines now minus 0.4, minus 0.5%. Presumably it is supporting consumption because real income is now improving, but it is not necessarily the case. Food inflation still year by year is like 1.3%. It's very slow to come down. I always continue to blame food retailers because they have been quite still bullish in keeping their prices. I found that in June, food prices were up 0.2%. month over month. It's really strange because right now, the yen has been appreciating, import inflation pressure is now fading, but food companies, retailers, and maybe dining out businesses, they continue to raise prices. And we tend to think that food inflation is waning on consumption, and we continue to argue that many Japanese do hate food inflation. And we tend to think that food prices in CPI tend to underestimate actual inflation because the volume adjustment, for example, quality adjustment, for example, is not enough. So I always, I talked about this for many times here. I talked about the tofu quality. I talked about, I think, the potato chips inside more airs, and sort of things. It's really happening. If you go to the restaurant and sort of things, I tend to think that quality has come down a lot. I think they talk to foreigners that if you come to Japan, you seem to feel Japanese food quality is high, price is cheap. No, we Japanese tend to think that quality is declining a lot and prices are coming up. So this is waning consumption, and unless the food prices come down, consumption will not pick up much in the near future. And again, this stimulus package is not necessarily helping. And one big puzzle still is that remaining quite weak wage growth. I think Shirai-san talked about that a bit. Interesting thing is that job growth right now is very, very strong. And interestingly, job growth has come down, then picking up again. But we found that new joiner to the labor market are mainly middle-aged women, part-timers, getting job in services. Their wage is quite low. And weighted average basis, still, the wage growth is very mild, like hourly wage maybe only 0.2% or something like that, for the first half of this year. So, the big issue for Japan is how to improve wage growth, in nominal in particular, and real maybe as well. But wage growth is the key. And recently, IMF said Japan has to introduce new income policies, and even penalize companies which do not follow government guidance to raise wages. How to penalize? By tax increases? I don't think it is happening, but I think the big question is how to improve wages. And we tend to think that that kind of policy is not necessarily in the new stimulus package. This is a bit of a disappointment. Let me briefly talk about the monetary policy and the fiscal policy relating to the risk to our GDP outlook. The biggest risk right now is the yen's appreciation, which could continue for some time from here. It is up to the Bank of Japan's policy management, but we tend to think that yen's appreciation will not stop. It is very difficult for the BOJ to surprise the market again. And Kuroda-san seems to have changed his stance a bit from the so-called shock and awe to more sustainable. I think the Kuroda-san changed. I think the Kuroda is, black field, right, in English. And he's changed from a bit of black to maybe gray. Shirakawa-san, the former government, is the white. So between white and black is gray. So I tend to think that it's not necessarily Kuroda-san, but I think the BOJ has, to some extent, given up taking shock and awe type of approach. But interestingly, the market people still expect shock and awe. I think this is a very bad habit of the market people. Even though I'm in the market, if I talk to foreign investors, they say, is it possible for the BOJ to double the JGB purchase? Almost impossible. But I think some say it is quite likely for the BOJ to expand JGB purchase operation because they did a doubling of equity purchase in July. So now I got a question from my clients that, is it possible for the BOJ to triple J-REIT purchase, for example? It's ridiculous in my view, but I think they are talking about that. And also, many people still believe that BOJ may start to do something similar to helicopter money. It's not direct underwriting, but maybe somewhat similar. Or government starts to consider print of the 50-year JGBs, right up to 40-year in terms of maturity, or even perpetual bond story. I don't think this is happening, but I think the market still expects such a kind of thing. And if Japan, BOJ, and the government continue to deny any such a type of action like, lengthening the JGB maturity or making the, letting BOJ to buy more foreign long-term bonds or quasi-underwriting, market will continue to be disappointed. So the risk is that the yen could continue to appreciate from here, depending on the U.S. Monetary policy. But we tend to think that yen could be breaking 100 on a more sustained basis into next year. And we still do not rule out the possibility that yen is breaking 90 by the end of next year. This is not necessarily my personal hunch. This is our, I think, the result of our quantitative analysis says the yen will touch 85 in 1.5 time. So if you do not like that view, please just criticize our quantitative model rather than myself. But again, this is the biggest risk because if the yen appreciates, corporate profitability goes down, capital expenditure will continue to go down. So it's very difficult for Japan to see pick up in terms of the growth into 2018. So it's the biggest risk. Second risk is the interest rate rise. I don't think the BOJ is, of course, raising interest rates or even though Shirai-san was opposed to the negative interest policy, but I don't think the BOJ is scrapping negative interest policy in anytime soon. But the one possibility for the central bank is that if they do focus on sustainability of this QE and not expanding JGB purchase from here, one possibility is that de facto tapering may start by the end of next year. It's not necessarily so soon, but if the market starts to price in, long-term interest start to pick up. This is, of course, affecting currency, yen appreciation, but it may be dampening housing investment maybe, and capex somewhat. One good thing from this long-term interest rise is to help profitability of Japanese financial institutions. So the risk-wise, yen's appreciation, possible rise in long-term interest rates, which could be dampening demand, but could be positive on financial sectors, I think, the profitability. But the very opposite to the second point of long-term interest rise is that if no rate rise is the case, like 10-year interest rates minus 10 bips, minus 20 bips, what happens? We have to be more worried about the future of the Japanese economy, mainly because of the weakening credit risk-taking capacity of Japanese banks. So if they take a look at yield curve shape, it's really flat. And in our analysis, the shape of the yield curve does matter. Not necessarily for demand, but does matter for banks' ability to extend loans. So under Abenomics and under QQE, one negative point is that even though BOJ can argue that it has been stimulating demand somewhat because of the borrowing may pick up for housing, maybe capex, maybe somewhat. In the meantime, it's maybe longer-term story, but the Japanese private banks, income prospects have deteriorated, and their capacity to extend loans would continue to deteriorate over medium run. It's not a short-term story, but longer-term story. So our worry is maybe two things. One is if the interest rates pick up by some reason, that would dampen demand. But if interest rates do not pick up at all, that would dampen financial intermediation's capacity over longer run. So I think that point is really relating to how we can increase wages and inflation on a more sustained basis. It's really important because it is okay for interest rate to pick up if inflation kicks in. So we should not necessarily be worried about interest rise if inflation picking up by wage growth, because real interest rates may not necessarily pick up. And it is also improving the the bank's ability to extend loans. So only way to get out from this situation, or only way to minimize the risk, would be raising probably wages and the medium-term inflation trend. Shirai-san talked about the expected inflation by household and the actual inflation's gap. I tend to agree. We have to anyway reduce the gap. but mainly through raising the wage growth. But
Yes.
again, this is a very difficult thing to do. Aging population, services sector is extending their share in the economy. I think outlook for wage is still very, very. I don't say it is not promising yet. So we'll see, but I think this wage story is very, very important. I stop here, and because I don't have any presentation, so yeah, I can stop here. Thank you.
I'm very sorry. Can I just change this set because my PC is too old to adapt to the switcher. I'm sorry. Yeah, I hope this will work. Thank you very much, R. And as a usual case, as a third of the three people, and I want to just make some supplement and adjustment are also showing a lot of different view of the situation. But this time, I'm not really for Abe or Abenomics. I'm being the most, I'm a criticizer for the monetary easing policy for past 10 years. And far before the Abe appeared and they actually did it. And I'm sorry, I also didn't major in economics. I'm very different from the usual. So also my titles economists are, I work for, I know very well about geography. The last foreign country I visited, Armenia. That was very interesting. And the day after tomorrow, I'll visit Ukraine. That would be very interesting too. I'm keenly interested in geography and also demography. That really affects the people's mind and the real economy. Okay, then I want to explain. I totally actually agree. Of course, I should agree because they have been talking truth, not expectation, and real observation and analysis. Then of course I have no, and also I really think that was the thing those things are. I'm so lucky that I have been predicted. And why I could predict that, I want to show you some very basic figures. And for all foreign press people, do you know the facts about Japan? No, don't. We have a problem. Japan has a problem that we don't check the number. Except Shirai-san, and she always checks, but most people don't check. For example, the Rio Olympic game has just ended. They say Japanese teams got the most number of the medals in the history, and 41 medals. That was the maximum in the history. So I want to ask you, what was the former best Olympic game before Rio for Japan? I mean, in what last Olympic game we won the most medals before Rio? And was that a Tokyo Olympic game or Barcelona at the bubble age or London just done 4 years ago? I asked this question to every Japanese, and most people say, well, we won the most medals before Rio. Maybe that was 52 years ago in Tokyo Olympic game. No, we won 8 medals in London 4 years ago. And that was the highest in the recorded history for Japan. And if maybe you have not been in Japan for 4 years, but few Japanese say, we got more medals than ever in London. Our young people are doing so well. We didn't say that 4 years ago. Only I was saying that because I always check number. You know what my point mean? I don't know. People always don't check, and people just believe rumor. Like this is just a short quiz. I'm sorry, I'm going to finish quick, but this is the quiz about the Japanese international competition in terms of trade. And now you see the current yen-dollar exchanging rate here. And how do you guess? Which is the true export of Japan? This or this? Okay, I'm asking all of you. Just see the screen. Don't look at the paper. See screen. Okay. Don't sleep. Please, you're not interested in Japanese economy. Just see the screen. Watch it. Okay? Hey, guess. Which is the real number of the Japanese export in the past 30 years? Has it been declining or has it been going up? Which do you think? This is right or this is right? And the truth is this. Okay, Japanese export has been growing, actually doubling in the last 30 years, even though high yen appreciation, and that's a very mere truth. If you just look up any kind of number, public statistics, you know it. But if you just meet some Japanese government officers in the Ministry of Industry Trade, International Trade, half of them don't know this. Okay? And because our import also has been increasing so much, that's why our trade balance is not so good as past, but actually we are earning money yet. And just think about this. If you just, make yen depreciated in this situation, what's going to happen? Actually, our export has been the maximum in history, so there's no positive impact of the more yen depreciation to the export. But if you just have the weaker yen, we're going to have more increase of import, then that will make our trade balance worse. Do you understand that? That kind of our very simple fact. Most Japanese neglect. This is a trade balance of Japan between any major economic figures in the world. And you don't know that. We're earning a lot of money from the United States, maybe you know it, but also we are earning quite an amount of money from all Asian industrial part. And we are just paying money for those Middle East and other oil-producing countries. And for those French, if you have any French or Italian, we are paying a lot of money for foods from Italy and France. That's why we are paying a lot more money to France and Italy, and also Suisse. But anyway, most Japanese people, or maybe you, think that maybe Japanese economy has been struggling because they're losing the power, a competitive power against Asian country in terms of manufacturing. No, we have been earning more money than ever from Asia. We're earning a lot of money from China, of course, from Korea, but we have been in so-called deflation for 20 years. Why? It's not a real usual situation described in usual macroeconomics. So then let's gonna see what happened in Abenomics. This is the monetary base. Because I'm not the major and I didn't major in our economy. I just try to use this most common and simple figures shown on internet, and I basically rely on Bank of Japan. And so this is the monetary base in yearly average. And so last year it was 313 trillion yen. That's about 8 times more than that of the bubble age. Then what happened? Okay, we had a stock price rise. Okay, this is the figure from our Tokyo Stock Exchange. They show our stock price of the stock market capitalization of each day since the 100 years ago. It's very convenient. It's the early average of the stock market capitalization. See, last year that was 569 trillion yen, actually the highest in history. It's very ridiculous that many Japanese people just focuses on Nikkei index. That in Nikkei index contents has been changing so much, and it doesn't tell so much about a real stock market. Just you don't have to don't forget about Nikkei, or you just watch the total, or accumulated stock market capitalization. Then you see our stock market has been at the peak thanks to the Abenomics. That was actually doubled. So about 300 trillion yen value has been added to our stock market in the last 3 years. So did that make GDP grow? Well, maybe not. All those figures are nominal, so GDP is also nominal. Our nominal GDP went up a little bit. But as you know, it's because of the slight inflation caused by our yen depreciation that made our import price a little higher. Then it doesn't really change the real GDP, but nominal GDP increased a little bit, but it didn't move at all. Then why it was that? This is the point that all of three are saying the same thing. Our personal consumption did not grow, but please take a look at this figure. Don't sleep. Don't forget about this. And your country, you will experience a similar in the future. United States, in China, even in Middle East, in maybe 1 century ago, after, maybe you will see this, okay? Stock prices doubled. Personal consumption stayed flat. No impact on personal consumption. Actually, final consumption expenditure of household consumption is nominal, has been flat. Same figure 20 years ago, 285. Now it's 286. It's flat. And see, this is the Lehman bubble and Lehman shock. They say Japanese economy suffered so much because of Lehman shock. No, our personal income did not drop. Almost none. This is an IT bubble. IT bubble crushed, no change in personal consumption. This is a real bubble in Japan's history. It collapsed and our stock price went down. Then actually our personal consumption has been increasing. If you want to criticize this, don't criticize me, no Shirakawa-san. Please criticize the cabinet office. But it's an official figure. Then I really want to criticize everybody who don't look this, who just say something learned from textbook, don't see reality. If you read the textbook, if your stock market, or you have a bull market, you will have more consumption, your GDP will go up. And if you have a stock price going down, then your consumption will go down, and also GDP will go down. No, we didn't do that. We have no sensitivity. Our consumption has no sensitivity over GDP or stock price. Why? I'm just saying the same thing as those two real economists said. See, our accumulated wage of the workers has not been increasing. I want to criticize all economists always talking about per capita wage. Okay, I don't really argue with the per capita things in this figure. Why don't you argue with the accumulated gross amount of the wages, total wage in Japan compared with the total consumption in Japan? There's a very clear correlation, of course. Because we don't have our accumulated wages not increasing, then our consumption is not increasing. The other words, those people who don't work and who has a lot of stocks and who made a huge amount of money with their stocks, didn't want to consume any money. So I always think why people are arguing so much about the people's expectation for inflation. Well, in Japan, who should consume are the man those have stocks, not those people having just usual people working. Why don't you consume with your selling your stock and buy something if you expect the next decline of the year, dropping down of the stock price? Why don't you buy things now? They don't buy it. They didn't do it. They don't want to buy. They just keep their money until they die. And of course, please laugh, but this is a real history of Japan proved in the last 20 years. Okay? And if you as those, Shirakawa-san, said, if we just succeed to increase the wage, if we just succeed to increase the total sum of those wage payable, then obviously we're going to see the increase of consumption as we had seen after bubble collapse in Japan until the 1997. We actually had a dropping down stock price but increasing wage, and then we had experienced increasing consumption. It's very clear. Then I have to say, what changed? What happened in 1997 that changed the rule? Well, some very, very least intelligent, some economist says it's because of the consumption tax. Well, so why does that happen in other countries with a more higher consumption tax? It's because of the demography. Working age population stopped increasing in year 1997. Then so far we have the number of workforce. I'm sorry, number of workforce. Those Japanese who have labor, who have job, has been flat or actually decreasing a little bit since 1997. Then, if you just see this, the number of the job in Japan is decreasing a little bit, then maybe you expect the higher unemployment rate. Actually, our unemployment rate is the maximum low, historical low now. We don't have any surplus labor. Maybe our employment rate is about 3%. Historically low. We don't have people to work. Why? Because we have decreasing working age population. See this. If you have a very keen eyes of a number, you see this. The clear correlation. Our working age population has been decreasing by 10 million in the last 20 years. Then actually we have our number of those who have jobs has not been decreasing so much because hopefully, thanks to the Abenomics too, more and more women now, capable women, or have better work. And also, thanks to those hard work seniors, more seniors are working. But number of those who have our job between 15 years old and 64 years old, okay, actually those workers are the working age population has been decreasing. Here's a contrast. It's the same figure, but I just make it a little bit with a contrast with it, or showing some exaggeration. Okay, under Abenomics, our number of those who have jobs increased a little bit, but actually number of those who have jobs between 15 years old and 64 years old, actually it is decreased a little bit, even though we had more women enrollment. Why? Because our working age population has been decreasing so fast. So now we have a huge, wide shortage of labor all over Japan. And those who, I will finish, those who have are analyzing just the old national figure, they don't know. I always analyze any local government's figure, okay? There's 18 local communities in Japan. I visit all of them. I know where are they and how they are. And in the last 20 years, okay, the least in Shimane Prefecture, the remote side of Japan with the Izumo Taisha, the west part and very aged area of Japan with less industry in Shimane Prefecture, their unemployment rate has been the lowest in Japan among 47 prefectures for last 20 years. What do I mean? Okay, when the communities is become aged and they have less and less young people to work, then our employment rate will increase. Employment decrease, unemployment decrease, and most people, it will make it full employed society. Because of the declining working age population, that prefecture's economy has been declining down so much. So I have to sum up. Yeah, do you understand? Maybe you don't understand because you are like, maybe your brain is like a slave of the common, conventional, so-called macroeconomics. It's like a religion. Once you see the reality, you feel it like religion. But anyway, declining working age population is not decreasing Japanese production, but actually decreasing the quantity of the products we buy. Then we don't stop, company does not stop overproduction, then we have less and less whole total sales. It's not a deflation, it's a microeconomics demand and supply theory, that if you continue supplying more than the demand, you will see the so-called deflation. And so you can do a lot of things. So I really welcome Abenomics in terms of the, promoting women employment and also wage increase. And also another thing is the more and more foreign investors consumption in Japan. That would help our economy a little bit. But profound resolution, well, we don't need it. We don't have unemployment. Okay, we have very strong manufacturing sector we don't need so much labor. And you say we have less productivity in service sector. Well, our service is the best in the world. If you just go to 7-Eleven and other convenience stores in any other country, you don't have any better service. Well, we don't pay so much for services, but actually we're living in very comfortable society, was so-called declining a flat economy, but actually not so many people are suffering from that. Well, of course, there are a lot of points to argue, but maybe I want to just say some kind of not extreme things. But Japan is extreme society, and finally, I don't explain, but see this. Okay, are actually your countries coming up behind Japan. Just see this figure if you have time and find out where is your country. Japan is here. United States here, and China's here. And nowadays, most part of the advanced world, also our industrialized Asia, is now following quickly Japan to become very aged society with declining working age population. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your good news about Japan. So, Anthony, we would like to open the floor for questions and answers. Please proceed to the mic and.
に戻しますので、とりあえずすぐ外れるようにしておきますね。
Anthony Rowley, Singapore Business Times. A nice simple question, I hope. Is Abenomics, excuse me, simply flogging a dead horse? As Motani-san has pointed out, consumption has not been noticeably affected by asset inflation created by the Bank of Japan, and I don't think investment has increased all that much either. And Isuke Sakakibara argues that Japan was really okay as it was before Abenomics, with a real growth rate of approximately 1% and mild deflation. So the question then is Abenomics flogging a dead horse? And if Abenomics is finally acknowledged to have failed, what happens then? Can Japan simply revert to a pre-Abenomics growth rate and mild deflation?
Yeah. Well, I want to say that please ask. I expect those people to say make more professional answer. From my demographic viewpoint, you see Singapore is just up there. You will see real increase of seniors in the near future. That will make the economy so difficult. But anyway, my point is that if you want to avoid inflation, the Japanese company should stop overproduction. I mean, producing more quantities than demanded. But if Japanese companies stop that, then China is now doing the same. I mean, you see, China, now they have declining working age population, even though the economy is not fully developed, of course, but the amount of cars they need, amount of the steel they need is sharply dropping down. I mean, the growth rate has been dropping down. Then they don't stop also our overproduction. So in the near future, almost all the countries in Asia will not stop overproduction. That will make the goods price, commodity price going down forever if they don't stop. Then Abenomics is not. It's like Abenomics is like so-called wasshoy. You know that? People are saying something in the festival to carry things. Wasshoy hard. It's just a voice. It's a song. So if you just sing it, or if you just stop singing it, it has no impact at all. It's a word, just abracadabra.
Yeah, okay. First of all, it is up to a definition of whether or not Abenomics fails. In what sense? Beating deflation, I think it has already proved a failure. And in terms of the improving potential GDP growth rate, still a bit of the question mark in our view. Mainly because of the new stimulus package and plus the increasing labor participation by women. It is helping. So my sense is that Abenomics has failed in beating long-lasting deflation, but so far, at the moment, there's a chance for Abenomics to be able to slightly improve potential GDP. If the whole government changes and Kuroda-san gets out and BOJ changes, what happens? I do not see inflation rate converging to 2%, of course. We tend to think that the trend inflation would be slightly negative. This is mainly because the trend wages growth is still negative, in our view. This is mainly because of the, very simply speaking, comparative advantage kind of view or globalization of the economy, global economy in my view. So it means wage level, in particular in the manufacturing industry, should continue to adjust on the downside. And the middle class income in that sense is under pressure. So unless we see a jump in productivity and significant increase in real wage level in the services, we're going to see wages continue to go down. So inflation will not pick up. Sorry, but I think the monetary policy cannot change the trend of inflation, even though it could affect, in the short run, a bit of the inflation. So my answer is that, sorry, but Abenomics cannot change the inflation trend.
So the question is whether Abenomics is failing. To me, at this moment, Abenomics is not successful in terms of achieving this 3% nominal growth and 2% real GDP growth, and for BOJ to achieve 2% growth. In that sense, yes. But I think what they try to achieve is quite important, because at least this BOJ's aggressive monetary easing gave the opportunity for some of the corporate sector to start to raise the prices of goods and services by providing innovative product and services. That before QQE, everybody was competing for the discount, and it was a very depressive environment. But now, after that, some people mention about food prices, but also I know a couple of manufacturers of food, and they try to convince the consumers by providing some additional value added. So, we started to see some positive behavior. So before QQE, the prices, people thought the price will not go up. So because price will not go up and wage will not go up, and very stagnant economy. So Abe tries to change this environment. So in that sense, I think what he tried to do is very important. But the point is that those measures which they are trying to bring in are probably not sufficient to raise people's expectation on wages and potential economic growth. Now, in terms of this BOJ's issue, before Kuroda came, the BOJ tries to do monetary accommodation 3 times in the history after collapse of bubbles. But every time the BOJ tried to introduce monetary easing, they stopped even before achieving the target. So BOJ was losing the credibility, So, and then Kuroda came and he did very aggressive monetary easing. And then I think that attempt was very important. But the truth is that it takes many years for Japan to achieve 2%. Just by, I gave you example today, household, ironically, feel that there is inflation now, and inflation going up rather than deflation. It's very complicated. And so household do not have any sense of deflation mindset. They think prices are so high. So why they feel that way? Because their wages are not going up, and because they think wages are not going up in the future. So it's very difficult because there's a very strong resistance by household with regards to the price hike. The corporate sector find it very difficult to raise the prices. So under this environment, it's very challenging for BOJ. BOJ they say we want to increase the inflation expectation, but the truth is households, the inflation expectations are so high, so it's not raising. It's important in how to reduce this bias. It's very, very challenging. It's far more complicated than what BOJ is trying to explain. So the only solution is, I guess we 3 of us agree, the wage We have to have expectation of higher wages. Without that, it's very difficult for us to continue to have a consumption growth. About services, I show you the chart about this nominal wage and the real wage levels that going down. One of the reasons is that because the Japanese economy is shifting towards services sector. Before, when there is we had a more competitive manufacturing sector, because manufacturing sector has a higher productivity, they can manage to have higher wages. So if we look at the average wages, historically, the manufacturing sector's wages are higher than services. But now, manufacturing sector is moving out, with the production locations moving out of Japan, and so our economy is really shifting to the services sector. And the services sector, the productivity is so low. So because it's so low, the wages are very low. So without having the productivity growth, it's very difficult for us to have, both increase in wages and increase in service prices. That's very challenging.
Thank you. Next question.
Should I just
Maybe we can get a few questions, no?
Hi, my name is Eleanor. I work for the Wall Street Journal. And I wanted to ask a little bit more about wages. So you've talked a lot about wages today, and some prominent economists and the IMF and even some Japanese politicians have discussed the possibility of wage policy by the government. I know that some people are uncomfortable with the idea that the government would take a policy and directly intervene in wage setting by companies. But it seems that up until now, Abe-san has put a lot of pressure on companies to raise wages, and they haven't significantly raised wages. So what do you guys think about those kind of wage or income policies?
I had a lot of discussion with IMF about this issue. Usually it's very quite strange for IMF to give this kind of proposal, because this is up to the corporate sector, right? And then corporate sector find it very difficult to raise wages. But to me, I can't, I understood, because I think the IMF wanted to send a message to the corporate sector that they really have to think about change the business model in such a way that they are at least able to pay, maybe increasing wages every year, because for many years they didn't raise their wages, right? Especially in services sector, they take it for granted. So they have their own existing wage setting models, But I think it's time to change. For example, if you look at regular workers and non-regular workers' wages, non-regular workers' wages are determined by demand and supply. So the wages are going up. But just because their wages are 60% below, 60% less than regular workers' wages, so average, when you look at average wages, it's not rising. But the truth is that labor shortage is there, and the wages are gradually rising in non-regular workers. So I think eventually, especially after 2020, when this baby boomer generation get 70 years old, we will have a very serious labor shortage. So corporate sector have to anticipate this very serious labor shortage, and someday they have to pay higher wages. So I think IMF knows it's very difficult for corporate sector to do it now, but they wanted to send this warning signal so that the corporate sector's mindset will be changed. Okay.
Yeah, the problem of Japan, well, first of all, I do not think such a kind of income policy does work. Zero chance, I think. Very limited chance for that, work. This is, I think, the, re-regulation of the economy. It is very difficult in a globalized, and I think the full capital, I think the mobilized economy in the growth. My sense is that I think the services sector's wages should pick up because of the shortage of labor. But higher quality, more professional businesses, jobs like us should continue to go down. Mm-hmm. The question is, what is the impact on weighted average basis wage? And the level-wise, I tend to think that my job in 10 years, the salary would be half, probably. Why? Because AI is coming. We don't need any economist in I think, the securities industry. I think analysts, we don't need. Or, at least their job description should change and their wage should go down. In my view, Japanese manufacturing industry, financial, real estate, even the government wages are too high, probably, and converge to some level which is somewhat higher than low quality services such as security guards, for example. But the point is, there is a significant mismatch in terms of demand for labor and supply of labor. Everybody do not want to have a job which is the physically, heavy. I think the best way for the many people is that just go to the office, sitting down, 8 hours, go out. Those jobs will be continuously replaced by, the capital. I don't think the company should have the reason to raise those guys' wages unless the capital productivity goes up at a meaningful extent. So I'm still quite doubtful about the wage growth, to improve into the future, even under some tighter labor market conditions. And also, IMF's suggestion is more as why not you change income distribution? Japan's income distribution seems to be so skewed to corporate sector. Why not you change? Labor share has to be picked up, but this is what? This is to just winning on corporate sector's profitability in my understanding. And international competitiveness should be, some extent, I think, deteriorating by that. Is it possible for the government to do that? I don't think so. So, in my understanding, why IMF says that is very simply speaking, they would like to sort of rescue the central bank. Because without any wage inflation, what happens to the BOJ? I think almost forever they're buying JGBs forever and up to 100% of the markets. I don't think it's really sustainable, and also something really strange happen in the future. So somebody has to rescue this. I think I would say kawaii central bank, right? So misery central bank. By raising wages, I think the wage policy has to be done, kind of thing. So this is my understanding.
Okay. Looks like those two people are saying also contradictory, but actually I want to agree to those two. But I want to say exaggerate one thing that also already Shirai-san said. See this. This is the demography, very simplified demographic situation of Japan. See, as I told you, our working age population maximum at 87 million in 20 years ago is now 77 million. Already we lost 10 million, okay? 12%. Working age population decreased already 12% in Japan. And what happened to the GDP? Actually, it has been flat. What happened to the personal consumption? Actually, it has been flat, not decreasing 12%. Why? Because to some extent, we had wage increase. Is that so? Well, actually, more and more seniors has been working also, or compared to 20 years ago, situation has become a little better. The more talented woman is getting more for their work. And then, so that means we could compensate a little bit of the decrease of the number of the labor by increasing wages of those women and seniors. Then what's going to do in the next 20 years, okay? We're going to see real decline of the working age population. And as maybe some of you argue, why don't you introduce more foreign laborers? Well, do you know the number of the foreigners living in Japan? That's 2 million, okay? If we want to increase that to 4 million, double it, only 2 million will increase. Then we're going to lose our working age population in next 20 years, about 20 millions. It doesn't work in increasing foreign labor will never compensate the loss of Japanese working age population. It's a physical, very basic understanding. I'm not arguing whether I should do or we should do. No, of course we should do, but it will not work. Then what are we going to do? Okay, we're going to increase our wage by 20% in the next 20 years. Can we do that? Well, Swiss people's wage is a lot higher, more than double compared to Japanese people, but I don't think we are not so less capable, we're less productive compared to Swiss, even though they are very capable. Okay? And also we have a huge illegal, irrational gap of the men and women wages. Why don't we pay may equalize it? Well, why don't we pay more money to women rather than paying money to dull senior males who don't consume? Why don't we stop the policy to raise the stock market price because stockholders will not consume? Why don't we stop those currency policies to make export companies earning more money, because how much ever they earn, they couldn't really make our personal consumption go up. It has been obvious in the last 20 years. Why don't we just focus on equal payment of men and women, or also let us abolish the seniority payment? Why don't we pay more money to blue-collar laborers of young people in Japan rather than paying huge amount of money to those financial crazy people? We cannot replace those workers in the nursery care, in the doctor, in the hospital to the robots. So we're going to see the new economy, really. Okay, and also we have huge amount of saving is owned by those seniors, and because we have the longest life expectancy in the world, senior will consume until the day they die. Then because senior doesn't work but they consume. That means the younger people will always have a job, even though the total number will gonna decline. That make really sense in Japan. That then we're gonna shift our economy slightly with the higher wage, less labor, with more and more automated society, with no people working for all the labor. You can substitute a computer or robots. Of course, the computer and robots will do that. Well, we have less and less people doing something that human capital should do. So actually, we're going to survive, better than you, because many of you have a surplus labor, increasing population, more angry youth who can go to IS. Actually, Japan will be safer than your country.
I just want to say, add one more thing about wage increase. A couple of months ago, I saw the questionnaire surveys on the corporate sector in United States. And the question asked, what is the most important motive for you to raise your own sales prices? The number one answer is wages. So indeed, also U.S. corporate sector, they try to raise their sales prices. The first reason is because of the wage increase. So once the corporate sector find that they have to raise wages, then they will try to find a way to provide innovative goods and services or pass on the sales prices. So actually, wages is one of the very important incentive for the corporate sector to raise sales prices.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I want to add one thing, exaggerate one more. We're going to see the retirement of the baby boomers in next 3 years. Okay, the current boom of the economic boom is actually due to those there. Abe says, he increased the number of the laborers because those retired seniors between 67 and 69 is still working, but they're going to retire, and pretty soon then we're going to see the real decline of the number of the working labor forces. Then, obviously, inevitably, those companies who want to survive should raise the wage, or they will not hire people. Yeah. And I really totally disagree that we should welcome the cheap labor from foreigners. We should hire more Japanese young people with higher. We need more competition to motivate young people to work with the more wage, and economically that will work. I think. I hope.
Hello, my name is Patrick Walter. I'm with the German newspaper Frankfurter Allgemeine. I'm wondering about this debate about wages, how we're coming back to this. I mean, the wage is a price for demand and supply on the labor market. And I'm just a little bit struck by the whole debate in Japan, not only the debate at this session, that the proposition is to raise wages without asking how I mean, if I'm listening to someone in Germany who tells me we should raise wages, usually it's someone from the union side because he's buying in the whole macroeconomic theory, but he don't tell me how productivity is going to raise and how the people are going to keep their jobs. So you have Japan, you have on the other side Southeast Asia, you have China, and there are still millions of people who are still integrating in the world economy. So how do you propose wage raises in Japan without thinking about potential unemployment in Japan?
So we get more question? No?
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. As Shirai-san and Shirakawa-san will answer economic realistic view, but I want to say about China. See, this is our Chinese demography. And of course, you know, or you should know, that China has been growing so much under the huge increase of the working age population. But about 2 years ago, it was at the peak. And now they have the declining working age population. And also, they have huge increase. They will see real rocketing increase of our senior people. Finally, China will have about 400 million. We'll see 400 million are seniors in maybe next 30 years. And also their working age population will decrease by 200 million. So that means China is already also under similar situations, the labor shortage rather than the labor surplus. Just 10 years ago, there are tons of Chinese who don't have jobs. But it's very obvious that they also should increase the wage. Okay, and also China, Japan is not doing the same thing. I mean, Swiss people maybe have the average wage is maybe 2 or 3 times more than Japanese. And 25 years ago, it was about the same. Japanese and Swiss wages about the same, but now they're making more expensive products. I don't use the word productivity. Productivity always kills the wage. If you have more productivity, then usually you don't pay less, you pay less. But our Swiss has very less productive things like handmade clocks, watches, actually very product. I mean, they can sell it for very high price, and that's because it's then that makes it productive. But anyway, Swiss people are selling higher things for higher prices for richer people, then they can provide higher wage. Okay, and Japan should become like a Swiss because Swiss is beside Germany with 1/10 of population of Germany. Japan is beside China with 1/10 the population of China. Okay. But I believe we should do that.
Yeah, well, the economic theory is that if the nominal wages pick up first without price increase, real wage picks up, demand for labor goes down. This is a very pure economics. And if demand for labor goes down, wages go down. It's not sustainable. So, wage growth, if it's sustained, if you forget about any increase in productivity, one way to do is to raise wages, prices simultaneously by government intervention. Because the point is, if the labor market tightening continues and if the service sector's wages pick up, impact on CPI would still be slightly limited. I think then, well, if the goods prices continue to go down, even though service inflation pick up some, I think this is a very much simple arithmetic. If the service sector's wages pick up by 2%, for example, and if the service sector CPI goes up, pick up 2%, but still, the overall CPI does not pick up more than 2%, means other than the service sectors, behavior is still keeping the wage level the same. So, theoretically speaking, what we want to do is the very simultaneous, the wage level, price level increase by government intervention. So, for example, on the 1st of January, everybody has to raise wages and prices, like taxi fares and all things, subways and medical costs and everything. This is the rule of Japan. So this is if the IMF says such a kind of thing, that may work, but the problem is that should require currency adjustment. because Japan's the competitiveness goes down. If the markets are forward-looking, if the 2% inflation every year at the beginning of the year, raising wages and prices, the competitiveness goes down. Currency has to adjust 2% every year. If they are forward-looking, what happens to the currency? Currency goes down by more than even 20%. Means import inflation is what? Real wages still continue to weaken, right? So on the day one, 2%, but if the inflation kicks in by the currency depreciation, the price increase will be faster. Real wage always under pressure. So I would say it's very difficult for us to see sustained increase in wages without a gain in productivity or the very strong improvement of the pricing power of Japanese companies. So it means any simultaneous increase in wages and prices should not lead to any depreciation of the currency. It means Japan suddenly, maybe because of the Nintendo, pricing power hugely improved. I don't think it's happening. So sorry, but I think the wage growth story is still not there in the country.
I have 3 points. In manufacturing sector, I think it's very difficult for the corporate sector to raise prices because it's subject to the international competition. So in the manufacturing sector, the wage have to be achieved by increasing productivity. Now, in the case of Japan, as you know, we have a serious labor shortage coming. So more robotics will be introduced. So probably manufacturing sector, not through the higher sales prices, but through labor productivity is a way to raise the wages. In a non-manufacturing sector, like tourism. Tourism is not very labor. Tourism usually do not have a very high productivity, right? In any countries. So that's why I mentioned today we have to accompany with some other professional services in order to have a total productivity growth in services sector. And then that aspect is lacking in the government report. So we have to distinguish between labor intensive and then higher value added services sector. For the higher values added service sector, maybe the corporate sector should try to find it. They may start to be able to raise prices. I think somebody mentioned that Japanese quality of service is very high, but it's not reflected in the prices. So that kind of changing the pricing pattern have to be changed. Now, one more thing, the highest inflation the BOJ achieved was 3.6%. That was May 2014, of which 2% came from consumption tax hike. So excluding consumption tax hike, the highest inflation the BOJ achieved was 1.6%. At that time, definitely wage growth was much lower than inflation. So real wage was sharply dropping. So everybody was complaining. Now no complaint. You know why? Because the nominal wage slightly increasing, but the inflation is deflation. So the real wage is actually going up. So ironically, not many complain. You don't hear a lot of complaint any longer. It's partly because of the failure of BOJ's policy, ironically. So that's why nobody complain now, because the prices are not going up. So, the truth is that for the BOJ, they really have to, pay attention to this fact, the upward bias and this low expectation wage growth, and I think after all, it really have to accompany the productivity growth.
Thank you.
Well, I'm sorry. Just one minute. I want to ask. There's actually people. Shirakawa-san and Shirai-san the same thing. That she says, it's a productivity increase. Shirakawa-san said, as long as the company is very competitive to charge a higher price for the products, you cannot achieve it. It's the same. Higher productivity is the ability to sell your products more for higher price. It's not a productivity. See this. maybe you don't know this. It's a manufacturing sector's accumulated figure, in last 12, 20, 30 years, okay? Our manufacturing output is actually not decreasing so much. Okay, our GDP produced by the manufacturing sector has not been decreasing less compared to 30 years ago. And our number of laborers actually become 2/3. You know that? Because of the automation. Many people say our production's always going out the country. No, it's wrong, because our exports more, and our internal output, production, net growth factory of Japan has not been decreasing. So that's a rumor. Everybody says rumor according to the religion. Okay, we have more and more factories ever, and I see this productivity. Our labor productivity of the manufacturing sector in Japan actually became 1.5 more compared to 30 years ago. See, productivity increase, less GDP. All of you say productivity increase will make the economy grow. No. It's very simple fact. Nobody can deny. Okay, so automation productivity increase made by automation with less labor will decrease the GDP, very obviously. So actually, there's a huge room for manufacturers to increase the wage too, because they have now a huge amount of the our cash, because they have better productivity, less wage, then they have a lot of money. So just stop just paying dividends. If they just increase the wage, actually they can do it. They have room. And in Japan, if you pay money to stockholders, it does not work to increase the GDP at all in the last 20 years. Then if you just persuade those manufacturers to pay a little more money to increase the wage, then actually our economy will boost up a little bit. Then they say, no, you cannot do that because because already those manufacturing sectors are very productive, they will not lose money. If they stop paying dividends and paying money to those workers, actually it does not hurt any competitiveness of the those companies. But then they have to do it because they will see real shortage of labor who can speak Japanese and working well with less wage in the war. We have very good laborers in Japan. Then they have to pay more because the number of those Japanese labor will decrease.
Thank you.
So economically, naturally, we're going to see the wage increase. And many of the competitive countries have room to increase the wage. And if you don't do that, you just get out. And that will make Japanese more productive, I think.
Thank you very much. We will extend the time a little bit because we have other people who would like to ask, and our guest
Maybe I will not answer.
accepted to stay. I would like Peter and gentlemen and gentlemen and gentlemen. For questions, please make your question short and address it to one panelist only. Thank you.
My name is Lang, and a freelance, or trying to be. Everything here is revolved around wages, so I'm considering.
Wages again.
Actually, it reminds me of the Bill Clinton campaign when they came out with that phrase, "It's the economy, stupid." So coming here to me reminds me of that. It's like Abenomics, it's wages, stupid. I don't know, but anyway, it's a similar idea that within Japanese companies, you've got this hiring mechanism of taking people in right from graduation. You have the Seishaien track, and now you have this growing part-timer. So I've heard talk of it's a structural problem that is actually affecting the ability to increase wages, and that Japanese industry or the government needs to look at creating some kind of hybrid out of this. I'd just like to know your opinion on that.
Let's get all questions.
Okay, let's have all questions, please, gentlemen, and you and Mukoto. Please ask the question
No,
first.
I think it's better to get all questions.
Please.
Shall I put the
This
question
is new
first?
policy.
Good. I'm David Koo. I'm with the British Embassy. I'd like to direct my question to the fiscal package and fiscal policy. So earlier this year, we started off the year with people like the IMF, G7, G20 talking about the need for perhaps more fiscal action in some of the key economies, including Japan, I guess. Earlier in June, where Mr. Abe postponed the consumption tax, many people were thinking, oh, maybe a new push on fiscal policy support for the economy. And therefore, with the latest fiscal package, it seemed a little bit disappointing in terms of the size, perhaps, and the direct impact on demand. Does the latest fiscal package give you any sense of where the fiscal policy approach or direction for the administration over the next 2 or 3 years is likely to be? Will they keep doing business as usual, i.e. not a big change in terms of fiscal policy support going forward? Or are they waiting for a more opportune moment down the road to perhaps push for more fiscal policy support, given that it looks as if monetary policy is running into limits?
Thank you. Please ask a question so they can give the answer.
Thank you for extending the time. My name is Chugani, and I'd like to ask you that, see the laborers who work on part-time basis, their income levels are taxed after 1.2 million a year, roughly. If the government increases this amount to 1.5 million, there'll be more ladies who like to work. I know many people who work till the 1.2 million and stop working in the same year. And the second thing is, instead of asking people to raise the wages, why doesn't the government reduce the income tax on the people of lower incomes so they can spend that money? That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Koto-san.
Makoto Honjo, associate. My question is, I think there are discussions about the minimum income policy in certain circles. And I was wondering what your opinion was about introducing a minimum income policy in Japan.
Thank you. Could each of you give very short, precise answer to everything? Thank you. We really have very limited time. Thank you.
I think about the wages. In the end, we have to have a equal wage for the equal job. Right now, I think still big companies, they still follow the seniority system. And I think we have to give an opportunity for women and young people, to get a higher promotion and, rather than ages. So still, corporate sector hasn't changed their mindset yet. So we really have to have more flexible working environment so that from there, maybe we have a chance to increase the productivities. About the fiscal policy, one more thing. Government tries to increase the public investment partly to increase the aggregate demand. But to me, the main problem is not the lack of aggregate demand, because Japan, almost the output gap is nearly cleared. So the people are not spending much because they don't see higher economic growth in the future, higher expected wage growth in the future. So it's not really current aggregate demand problem. Rather, it's more on a potential future issue.
Yeah, well, for wage setting, I think I tend to think that part-timers' hourly wage is more properly set than full-timers' wage, actually. The point is that appropriate set means, I think the full-timers' wage seems to be maybe somewhat too low, maybe compared with their productivity, maybe a bit of controversial. But I think the point is there is a big, I think the influence costs to companies, education costs, training costs, and sort of things. So I think the wage has to be somewhat lower than productivity for full-timers, than part-timers. So I tend to think that the issue is to raise wages for part-timers, or is the issue to cut wages for full-timers still? So my view is a bit different from maybe Motani. This is my view on that. And on the fiscal package question, I tend to think that again, Japan's problem right now is running the very high current account surplus, and of course, in the global context, Japan has to reduce current account surplus by increasing imports by fiscal stimulus. But I think the point is that Japan still, sticks to the primary balance target. And in that sense, it's very difficult for them to increase the spending in real water. And in that sense, I think this is the maximum they can do for the moment. And I don't think Japan will change in the view, it stands on fiscal policy, unless the current account surplus continue to go up. So means without the further significant pressure from the outside of the country, Japan's stance on fiscal will not change. I think try to, behave we are doing, but in reality not much. And because I think this is a primary balance target, constraint. And also sort of about the part-timer, the question of the raising part-timers' wage. I think again, a bit of in my view, it's a bit different from what I'm thinking. But I think the point is then more labor participation then means but I think wages are not picking up. Full-time wage may go down. Probably. I think the labor market conditions would maybe even getting somewhat looser than now if they raise part-time wages and if more labor participation by female sort of things. And finally, minimum income policy. I don't know. The minimum wage will be picked. Is set to be raised by 3% this next year, and the income policy maybe include those minimum income policy. But I think I tend to think that. I think they can raise minimum income kind of thing, but I think the point is I do not think Japan's income tax policy is really something which is to lower the tax rate for lower income people. But I think they have to cut the tax rate for the higher income people like us. It's definitely the case because I think I do say that too limited number of Japanese paying income tax. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, so all the questions are also answered. So see this, talking about the fiscal policy. See, Japanese GDP has been flat, and also, as I mentioned our personal consumption has been flat. And I don't show that figure in this figure, but what about our public investment, amount of public investment done by government? Okay, actually, it has become 40% of the past maximum size. Okay, that was, used to be at 50 trillion yen around this year, and now it's at 20 trillion yen. Actually, so it became just the 40% of the past. Then that kind of drastic decrease of the public investment did not affect at all to the personal consumption. So again, I want to say to those people read just textbook who don't see the reality. Okay, we have really limited number of unemployed people. Then what if we just increase the public investment, do like a New Deal things? Then those people working for public sector will change the public sector to work, and then after the public investment finished, then they will return to the private sector. That will not increase at all to the unemployment rate because we don't have those people unemployed.
Thank you.
So that doesn't work. So we don't have to increase it.
All right, thank you. This wraps up our event today. But I just want 1 second answer from Mr. Shirakawa. Are you sure the yen is going to be, the dollar is going to be 85 yen? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. This is very worrisome. All right. Let me give you 1 year ordinary membership to our club.
That's great for me to travel around the world.
Sensei. Shirakawa-san, we hope your salary doesn't cut and you come here and spend money more in the club. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you and have a nice evening.
I met you before, no?